My dad wanted me to look exactly like him, no matter what it took. As soon as I hit puberty, Dad became obsessed with making me his clone. He put photos of himself in high school everywhere like he was a celebrity, and every week he'd drag me to each photo. He'd compare our faces, literally drawing circles on my face with a whiteboard marker where I was failing him. Like, sorry, my nose came out straighter than yours, Dad. My bad. The measuring started when I hit 13 and my voice cracked. Suddenly, he's in my room at 6 a.m. with a whole toolkit, height against his pencil marks on my doorframe, shoulders with a tape measure, the space between my eyes with these weird metal things. Dude had spreadsheets tracking whether I was growing into his mini-me. If I shot up too fast one month, he'd cut my calories. Growing too slow? Time to choke down protein powder that tasted like chalk mixed with disappointment. The hair thing was psychotic. Had to part it exactly like his yearbook photos, with this dorky swoosh thing that made me look like I time-traveled from 1987. When my hairline wasn't matching up to his teenage perfection, he legit took me to get evaluated for hair plugs. I was sitting there, 14 years old, while some doctor explained that maybe we should wait until I'm done with puberty. Dad stormed out screaming about missing the window, like my forehead was about to expire. Mom tried to save me exactly once. She caught him plucking my eyebrows because mine grew in wrong, and she finally said, "Don't you think this is unnecessary?" Big mistake. Dad went nuclear, pulling out his photo museum and ranting about how her inferior genetics were sabotaging his legacy. He called me a contaminated version of him. Mom just gave up after that, probably figured it was easier to let him pluck my face than deal with his meltdowns. By 15, puberty was really screwing with his master plan. My jaw stayed narrow while his photos showed this comic book superhero chin. My nose refused to widen. My eyes were apparently a millimeter too far apart, which he discovered during one of his triple daily measurement sessions. He'd stare at me during dinner like I was personally insulting him by having the wrong bone structure. That's when Dr. Frankenstein, name changed to protect the incredibly guilty, started shopping for surgeons. 6 months before my 16th birthday, he's showing me PowerPoints about facial reconstruction, jaw implants for that manly square look, rhinoplasty to beef up my bridge, something called facial masculinization, which sounded like torture with a medical degree. He'd found doctors willing to carve up a teenager for the right price, had payment plans and everything. I tried reasoning with him, which was stupid, but I was desperate. Said I'd do whatever he wanted, wear his dorky clothes, keep the embarrassing haircut, anything but letting someone break my face. He held up his favorite photo and said, "You're an insult to my genetics, but we can fix that." Ice cold. 2 weeks before surgery day, I snapped. I snuck into his shrine of an office and grabbed every single teenage photo of himself. I lit them up in the backyard with the lighter I'd stolen from Mom's purse. All his proof of perfection turned to ash while he was at work bragging to coworkers about his upcoming mini-me reveal. Felt good for about 5 seconds until I realized I'd just poked the world's vainest bear. Dad came home to his burnt offerings and went silent, which was terrifying. He called the surgeon right there and moved everything up. "We'll work from my perfect memory," he said, like his brain was some kind of facial blueprint archive. First surgery in 3 days, breaking my jaw to match his delusions. That night, he was on the phone reciting measurements like poetry. The exact angle of his teenage jaw, the precise width of his nose at 16, reconstructing data from his narcissistic memory bank. Already paid in full, he mentioned. No backing out now. The surgeon had cleared a whole week for Project Make My Son Into Me. Next morning was marking day. Dad drew all over my face with Sharpie, black lines showing implant locations, areas to shave down, places to build up. I stared at my face covered in surgical roadmaps when Mom appeared in the doorway, holding Dad's old wrestling trophies, but her hands were shaking. "Found something else in the trophy case," she said, voice tiny but determined. "Your grandfather's photos." She spread them out like playing cards. Dad's real teenage face, crooked nose, weak chin, eyes practically touching, nothing like his edited memories. Dad went white as printer paper, staring at his real teenage face. Then he grabbed the photos and shoved them in the trash. "Fake," he said, voice steady again. "Your mother's trying to sabotage this." He turned to me with that same cold smile. "The surgery's still on, but now we're adding more procedures." He pulled out a new folder, thicker than before. "We're going to remake you completely. 6 surgeries instead of 3. We start with completely breaking down your bone structure." He kept flipping through pages showing skeletal diagrams. "You'll be in recovery for months," he said. "But when you're done, you'll be perfect. You'll be me." I sit on my bed staring at the mirror, tracing the black Sharpie lines Dad drew across my face. The surgery folder sits on my desk, twice as thick as before, and I flip through the pages with shaking hands. 6 procedures instead of 3. Recovery time measured in months instead of weeks. The first surgery is scheduled in 3 days now, not 2 weeks like before. I burned his photos thinking I was fighting back, but all I did was speed everything up. The window to stop this just got cut in half and I have no plan except panic. I touch the marks on my jaw where Dad wants to break the bone and rebuild it to match his memory. My hands won't stop shaking as I read through consent forms and payment schedules and diagrams showing exactly how they'll crack my face apart and put it back together wrong. The folder has my name on it, but nothing inside feels like it's about me, just about making me into someone else. I close the folder and shove it under my bed where I don't have to look at it anymore. Sleep doesn't come that night because every time I close my eyes, I see surgical tools and broken bones and Dad's face staring back at me from a mirror. Before school the next morning, I lock myself in the bathroom with Mom's makeup remover and start scrubbing the Sharpie lines off my face. The bottle says gentle formula, but it burns my skin as I rub hard enough to erase every black mark Dad drew. My face turns red and raw from the effort, the skin around my jaw and nose feeling tender and hot. I use cotton pads and then paper towels when those run out, scrubbing until the marks fade to gray smudges and then disappear completely. My reflection looks angry and damaged even without the surgical roadmap, my skin blotchy and irritated. Mom appears in the doorway holding a towel, but she doesn't say anything, just watches me destroy my face trying to clean it. When I meet her eyes in the mirror, she turns away and walks back down the hall. The silence between us feels heavier than Dad's rage ever did. This thick quiet that means she sees what's happening but won't step in to stop it. I splash cold water on my burning face and grab my backpack, heading out the door before Dad wakes up and notices I erased his work. I find Dad's wallet on the kitchen counter while he showers upstairs, the water running loud enough to cover any noise I make. Inside are his insurance card and driver's license, the two things he'll need for any medical appointments or procedures. My heart pounds so hard I'm sure he can hear it through the bathroom door as I slide both cards out of their slots. It's a small thing, just making him search for documents, but any friction might buy me hours or days. I walk to the kitchen trash can and dig through coffee grounds and banana peels until I reach the bottom, then bury the cards under all the garbage. Dad will tear the house apart looking for them, probably blame Mom for moving his stuff, and maybe the delay will give me time to think of something better. I wash my hands and put his wallet back exactly where I found it, then grab a granola bar and head out the door. The water shuts off upstairs just as I step outside and I walk fast toward the bus stop before Dad can call me back inside. In first period, I sit alone at my desk near the window and try to focus on the teacher talking about something I don't care about. The school counselor's office is across the courtyard, and I catch Mrs. Gutierrez watching me through her window. She's noticed something is wrong, probably because I haven't spoken to anyone in 3 days and keep touching my jaw like I'm checking if it's still mine. My face still feels raw from scrubbing off the Sharpie this morning, and I wonder if she can see the red marks from where she's standing. When class ends, I grab my books and head toward my locker, hoping to disappear into the crowd before anyone tries to talk to me. But Mrs. Gutierrez is waiting by my locker with this gentle expression that makes my throat feel tight. She asks if I have a few minutes to chat, her voice quiet and careful like she's approaching a scared animal. I want to say no, but something about the way she's looking at me makes me nod instead. She leads me back to her office and closes the door, and I realize this might be the first time an adult has actually asked if I'm okay. I spend lunch period in the library instead of the cafeteria, using a school computer to research minor consent laws. The search results are confusing and full of legal words I don't understand, but I screenshot everything that looks useful. Some websites say that in certain medical situations, my refusal might actually matter, that doctors are supposed to get my permission too, not just my parents. Other sites say parents have complete control over medical decisions until I'm 18. I create a new email account using a fake name and forward all the screenshots to myself, building a file of information I might need later. For the first time in weeks, I feel a tiny spark of hope mixed with confusion about what any of this actually means. The bell rings and I clear my browser history before logging out, making sure no one can trace what I was researching. I head to my next class with my phone heavy in my pocket, filled with evidence I don't know how to use yet. After school, I lock my bedroom door and pull out Dad's surgery folder from under my bed. I use my phone to photograph every single page, including the consent forms with my name on them, the procedure descriptions explaining exactly how they'll break my jaw, and the payment plans showing Dad already paid in full. The folder is so thick it takes 20 minutes to photograph everything, my hands shaking as I flip through pages describing what they want to do to my face. I find old photos I texted to a friend weeks ago, back before Dad started drawing on my face, and I save those as proof of what I looked like before the Sharpie marks. Then I take new photos of my red, irritated skin from scrubbing this morning, showing the damage already happening. The documentation feels like building a case, though I don't know yet who will see it or if anyone will care. I shove the folder back under my bed and start uploading the photos to my computer, organizing them into folders labeled with dates and descriptions. I create a new cloud storage account using the fake email from earlier and upload everything, all the photos and screenshots and documentation of what Dad wants to do. Then I email the login information to my secret account and delete all traces from my phone. Dad checks my phone randomly, going through my texts and photos whenever he wants, so I can't risk him finding evidence of my evidence. The act of hiding proof makes me feel slightly less powerless, like I'm taking back tiny pieces of control even though I'm still trapped. I empty my phone's trash folder and clear my recent apps, covering my tracks carefully. Then I put my phone on my desk and stare at it. This device that Dad thinks he controls, but that I just used to build a case against him. It's not much, but it's something. This hidden file of proof that exists somewhere he can't reach it. At dinner, I position my phone on my lap under the table and start recording as Dad launches into his usual speech about facial measurements. His voice is calm and detailed as he describes breaking my jaw in 3 places, explaining exactly how the surgeon will reshape my bone structure to match his teenage face. He talks about angles and proportions like he's reading poetry, reciting numbers he's memorized from looking at himself in old photos. Mom pushes food around her plate and doesn't look at either of us, her fork scraping against ceramic in the silence between Dad's words. I feel sick listening to him talk about my face like it's a construction project, like breaking bones and installing implants is the same as remodeling a kitchen. The recording captures everything, his voice steady and certain as he describes the recovery process and the timeline for each procedure. When dinner ends, I slip my phone back in my pocket and help clear the table. The recording saved and ready to send to someone if I can figure out who might listen. I lie awake all night with my chest tight and my heart racing, unable to stop imagining the surgery. I picture the anesthesia mask over my face, the moment everything goes dark, waking up with my jaw wired shut and my face swollen beyond recognition. Every time I start to drift off, another image jolts me awake and I give up on sleep around 2 a.m. Instead of just panicking, I grab a notebook and start writing down small ways to delay things. Lose paperwork, miss appointments, claim I'm sick, hide Dad's car keys. Each idea gets its own line in the notebook. Strategies for buying time even though I don't know what I'm buying time for. My anxiety channels into planning, this focused energy that makes me feel slightly less helpless. By the time dawn breaks through my window, I have 3 pages of ideas, most of them desperate and stupid, but at least there's something. I hide the notebook under my mattress and try to catch an hour of sleep before school. Dad announces over breakfast that I have lab work scheduled for this afternoon, and he's already booked us a hotel room near the surgical clinic for tomorrow night. The timeline is moving faster than I can think, each day shorter than the last, and I realize he's trying to rush everything through before I can organize any resistance. My hands shake so badly I knock over my orange juice, watching it spread across the table in a bright puddle. Mom jumps up to grab paper towels, but Dad just stares at me with this knowing look, like he can see exactly what I'm thinking. He tells me to pack a bag after school because we're leaving straight from the lab appointment, no time to come home first. The clock pressure makes my whole body feel tight and panicked. 3 days shrinking to 2, shrinking to tomorrow, and I still have no real plan except hiding documents and taking photos that might not matter at all. The next morning, I wake up to Mom sliding something under my door while Dad's in the shower. I grab the folded paper and unfold it on my bed. Just 3 words in her shaky handwriting. I'm scared. That's it. No plan, no promise to help, no actual protection. I crumple the note in my fist and shove it in my pocket, feeling bitter because her fear doesn't do anything for me. Her being scared doesn't stop Dad from booking surgeries or drawing on my face with markers. It's just more weight I have to carry, knowing she's terrified but still won't actually do anything. I stuff the note deep in my jeans and head to the school. At the school, I lock myself in the bathroom before first period and mess with my hair in the mirror. I part it on the opposite side from Dad's stupid swoosh, running my fingers through it until it falls completely different. The small act of defiance makes my chest feel lighter for the first time in days. I look like myself instead of some knockoff version of Dad's teenage photos. For 3 hours, I walk through the halls feeling almost human, like I took back a tiny piece of control. Nobody notices the hair change except me, but that's the point. It's mine. When I get home that afternoon, Dad's waiting by the door. His eyes go straight to my hair and his face goes tight. He doesn't say anything, just grabs my arm and drags me to the bathroom. I try to pull away, but his grip digs into my skin. He yanks the electric clippers from the drawer and turns them on. The buzzing fills the small bathroom. He shoves my head down and runs the clippers across my scalp in uneven patches, not caring about making it look decent, just punishing me. Hair falls into the sink and on the floor. I watch in the mirror as sections of my scalp show through where he buzzed too close. The humiliation burns hot in my throat, but I don't cry. I just stare at my reflection getting more destroyed with each pass of the clippers. When he's done, my head looks like someone attacked it. Patches of different lengths, bare spots, completely uneven. He unplugs the clippers and walks out without a word. I stand there looking at what he did and feel the humiliation turn into something colder. Anger that sits heavy in my stomach. The next morning after Dad leaves for work, I'm still staring at my messed up hair in the bathroom mirror. I grab the clippers he used on me and turn them on. If he's going to destroy my hair as punishment, I'll destroy it as my choice. I run the clippers over more sections, shaving chunks down to the scalp myself. It looks terrible, worse than what Dad did, but it's my terrible choice, my deliberate destruction. I'm taking back the decision he tried to steal. When I'm done, my head is a mess of uneven patches and bare spots, but I did it to myself. Dad can't use my hair to control me if there's nothing left to control. That evening, when he sees what I did, he goes red in the face and starts yelling about me sabotaging his plan. I just shrug and tell him there's nothing left to buzz. He slams his fist on the table, but I've already proven my point. I'd rather destroy myself than let him control every single detail. During first period the next day, I ask for a hall pass to see Miss Gutierrez. She's the school counselor who's been watching me from her office window. I knock on her door and she waves me in. I sit down and pull out my phone, opening the photos I took of Dad's surgery folder. I show her the pages about jaw implants and nose jobs and facial reconstruction. My hands shake a little as I swipe through them. I explain that my dad wants to surgically change my face to look like his teenage self. 6 different procedures to remake my bone structure. Missy Gutierrez listens without interrupting, her face shifting from concern to alarm as I describe each planned surgery. I show her the consent forms and the payment plans. When I finish, she leans forward and asks if I have any audio recordings. The question catches me off guard because I didn't expect her to take it this seriously. I nod and tell her I recorded Dad at dinner talking about the surgeries. She writes something down in her notebook, and I realize she's actually building a case. She's taking this seriously enough to document everything. When I get home, I use my laptop to forward the dinner recording to Ms. Gutierrez from my secret email account. I attach the audio file and write a short message explaining what's on it. Then I delete the sent message and clear my browser history. The next morning before first period, I get called to Mrs. Gutierrez's office. She's sitting at her desk with headphones on, listening to something on her computer. When she sees me, she takes the headphones off and closes the door. Her face is set in this professional determination that makes my stomach flip. She tells me she listened to the recording of Dad reciting measurements and talking about breaking my jaw. She says she needs to make some calls and asks me to trust her. I feel this weird mix of relief and terror because I just handed my survival to an adult I barely know. But she's the first person who's actually taking action instead of just feeling bad for me. After school that day, Dad's waiting in the kitchen with papers spread across the table, consent forms for the surgeries. He tells me to sit down and sign them to show I'm on board with the improvement plan. I stay standing and refuse to touch the pen. He gets calm in that scary way where his voice goes quiet and steady. He explains that parental consent is legally good enough for minors. My signature would be nice, but it's not required. The power imbalance crashes over me and I understand how little control I actually have. He can make this happen whether I agree or not. The forms sit there on the table and I walk out of the kitchen without signing anything. It doesn't matter. He doesn't need my permission. The next afternoon, Miss Gutierrez calls me into her office at the end of the school day. She closes the door and tells me she filed a mandated report to the CPS hotline based on our conversations and the evidence I gave her. Relief floods through me so fast I feel dizzy, but it's mixed with dread about what Dad will do when he finds out. Miss Gutierrez promises the report is confidential, but warns me that an investigator will probably contact my family within 48 hours. I nod and thank her, my voice coming out shaky. I leave her office feeling like something is finally happening, but also terrified about the explosion coming when Dad figures out someone reported him. At dinner that night, Dad announces he moved the surgery timeline up again. He says the clinic had a cancellation and we need to take the slot or lose our place. His voice is casual, but his eyes are intense, watching my reaction. I realize he's racing against something he senses coming. Maybe he knows about the CPS report somehow, or maybe he just feels the walls closing in. The urgency makes it hard to breathe. My chest gets tight and my stomach twists. I excuse myself and barely make it to the bathroom before I throw up. I kneel on the floor with my head over the toilet, hearing Dad's voice through the door asking if I'm okay. I don't answer. The next morning while Dad's at work, the house phone rings. Mom answers it in the kitchen and I listen from the hallway. Her voice is shaking as she talks to someone named Miss McNeil, a CPS investigator. Missy McNeil schedules a home visit for this afternoon to discuss concerns about medical procedures. Mom says okay in this tiny voice and hangs up. I feel anxious hope mixed with terror about what happens when Dad finds out. Mom sees me in the hallway and her face is pale. Later that afternoon, Mom finds me in my room. She whispers that she'll make sure to be home for the CPS visit instead of running errands like she usually does. She doesn't promise to support me or contradict Dad, just says she'll be there. I feel frustrated because her presence is something, but it's not the protection I actually need. She's promising to be in the room while someone else tries to help me, but not promising to help me herself. It's better than nothing but barely. The next morning at the school feels weird because I'm walking around with this huge secret that could blow up my whole life. I skip first period and hide in the bathroom during lunch, standing in front of the mirror practicing what I'm going to say when someone actually asks if I want the surgery. I stare at my reflection and say it out loud. I don't consent to any facial surgery. My face doesn't need fixing. I'm refusing all procedures. The words sound stronger when I hear them in my own voice instead of just thinking them. I pull out a notebook and write everything down in clear sentences. No crossing out or messy handwriting, just plain statements about what I want and don't want. I take photos of each page with the school iPad I borrowed from the library, making sure the words are readable in the pictures. My hands shake a little, but I get through it. The preparation makes the panic in my chest ease up slightly, like I'm putting on armor made of my own words. Mrs. McNeil shows up at our house right at 3 o'clock that afternoon. I watch through my bedroom window as she parks and walks up to the front door carrying a folder and wearing professional clothes. Dad opens the door before she even knocks, and his whole face changes into this warm smile I haven't seen in weeks. He shakes her hand and welcomes her inside like she's a friend dropping by instead of someone investigating him. I come downstairs and Dad immediately puts his hand on my shoulder, squeezing it while he talks about how much he supports my development and wants what's best for me. The squeeze gets tighter when Miss McNeil looks at me and I tense up under his grip, but try not to make it obvious. Dad shows her around the house, pointing out my room and the photos on the walls, talking about our close relationship and how we make decisions together as a family. I avoid eye contact when he says that last part because it's such a massive lie. Mrs. McNeil watches everything with this neutral expression that gives me nothing. I can't tell if she believes him or sees through the performance. Mom sits on the couch with her hands folded, not saying much. Mrs. McNeil asks to see all the medical paperwork, and Dad's face gets this tiny flicker of tension before the smile comes back. He pulls out the thick folder with all the surgery plans and starts explaining his vision for my appearance, using words like enhancement and confidence building. Mrs. McNeil takes notes while he talks, writing down specific things he says. She asks if I've expressed any concerns about the procedures, and Dad immediately jumps in to say I'm fully on board, that we've discussed everything thoroughly. I sit there silent on the couch next to Mom, my jaw clenched so tight it hurts. Mrs. McNeil looks at me and asks if I have anything to add. The air feels heavy and thick, like everyone's holding their breath. Dad's hand lands on my knee, pressing down. I shake my head because I'm too scared to contradict him right now with him sitting next to me. Mr. McNeil writes that down too. Dad takes me to the clinic late that afternoon for pre-op lab work. The building is small and clean with that medical smell that makes my stomach turn. Dr. Copeland meets us in an exam room and barely glances at me before pulling up the surgical plan on his computer screen. He talks to Dad like I'm not even there, going over technical details about incision points and bone structure. I try to interrupt to say I have concerns about the procedures. Dr. Copeland holds up one hand without looking at me and keeps talking to Dad about recovery timelines and follow-up appointments. My face gets hot and my fists clench in my lap. This doctor sees me as a project, not a person who gets a say in what happens to my own face. Dad nods along and asks questions about the specific measurements they'll use. The nurse takes my blood and I watch the vial fill up, feeling like they're already taking pieces of me. That night, I look up everything I can find about anesthesia consults on my phone before Dad takes it away. I learn that anesthesiologists are supposed to ask patients directly about consent and explain the risks. I write out a refusal speech in my notebook, practicing the exact words I'll use tomorrow morning. I will not consent to being sedated. I do not agree to any surgical procedures. I am refusing treatment. The focused work pushes back against the panic trying to swallow me. I read through my notes 5 times until I have the words memorized. My resolve feels sharper now, like I'm building a weapon out of my own voice. At dinner, Mom suggests maybe we should delay the surgery because my scalp looks irritated from when Dad buzzed my hair. She says infection risk in a quiet voice, not looking at either of us. Dad's fork stops halfway to his mouth and he sets it down carefully. He says the surgeon already cleared me and we're not postponing over imaginary problems. His voice is calm, but there's steel underneath. Mom shrinks back in her chair and doesn't say anything else. I watch her small attempt at protection get crushed and feel this heavy despair settle in my chest. Her half measures never go far enough. She tries just enough to make herself feel better, but not enough to actually help me. Dad changes the subject to what time we need to leave tomorrow and acts like Mom never spoke. After dinner, Dad tells me to hand over my phone. He says I don't need distractions before surgery and takes it right out of my hand. I give it up without fighting because I already moved everything important to the cloud storage and my secret email account. He doesn't know about the school Chromebook I can use or the library computers. I've planned for this exact situation. His attempt to cut me off from help fails because I thought ahead. The small victory makes me feel slightly less trapped, like I still have some control even when he thinks he's taking it all away. The next morning, Miss McNeil pulls me out of second period. A student aide brings a note to my teacher, and I follow them to an empty conference room at the end of the hall. Miss McNeil closes the door and sets up a recording device on the table between us. My voice shakes when I start talking, but I push through it. I tell her everything. The photos I burned and how Dad moved up the timeline, his obsession with making me look like his teenage self, the 6 surgeries he's planning. How I've said no over and over, but he won't listen. The Sharpie marks on my face, the measurements and spreadsheets. Dr. Copeland talking over me like I don't matter. Miss McNeil records it all and asks specific questions about dates and what exactly Dad said. She promises to act quickly, and I feel this shaky honesty mixed with pure terror about what Dad will do when he finds out I talked. But it's done now. Everything's on record. Dad picks me up from the school early that afternoon, showing up at the office during 4th period. He signs me out and doesn't explain why until we get home. When I walk into the house, I notice immediately that my bedroom door is gone. Just gone. Like it never existed. Dad follows me upstairs and points to a small camera mounted in the corner of my room. A baby monitor. He explains in this reasonable voice that he needs to monitor my health before surgery and make sure I'm not doing anything to mess up the procedures. The camera watches my whole room except the corner by the closet. I feel like a prisoner in my own house, like the walls are closing in. My brain can barely think past the panic screaming through every nerve. I sit on my bed and stare at the camera and understand that privacy is gone now, that he's watching everything I do. That night, I drag my blanket into my closet and shut the door as much as I can without making it obvious. I wedge myself into the corner with my back against the wall and pull my knees up to my chest. The camera can't see into this tiny space, and for the first time in hours, I can breathe without feeling watched. I practice unlocking my bedroom window silently, running through the motion in my head over and over. Push up the bottom pane, pop the screen out, drop to the bushes below. I map out every step from my room to the street, timing how long it would take to grab my go bag and run. My brain won't shut off, just keeps calculating distances and risks and backup plans. I think about which neighbors might help, and which one's dad is charmed into thinking he's perfect. Mrs. Miller, 2 houses down, has always been nice to me, and she's usually up late watching TV. The Rodriguezes next door are too close to Dad. I mentally rehearse the route to the school, to the library, to anywhere that isn't here. Every creak in the house makes me flinch, and I check the closet door to make sure it's still cracked open so Dad doesn't get suspicious. Around 2 a.m., I finally fall asleep, sitting up with my head on my knees, and when I wake up, my neck is stiff, and my legs are numb. Dad drives me to the clinic the next morning for the anesthesia consult, and I'm so tired I can barely think straight. The anesthesiologist is a woman maybe Mom's age with glasses and a calm voice. She goes through a checklist of questions about allergies and medications, and then she looks right at me and asks if I consent to the procedure. I sit up straighter and my voice comes out clear, even though my hands are shaking under the table. I tell her no, I don't consent. I don't want any surgery. The words hang in the air for a second, and I watch her eyes flick to Dad and then back to me. She asks me to repeat myself, and I do, slower this time, making sure every word is clear. I refuse all surgical procedures. I don't want my face changed. Dad's expression goes tight and controlled, that scary calm he gets when he's furious but trying not to show it. The anesthesiologist hesitates, clicking her pen a few times while she looks between us. She asks Dad if we can have a moment, and he says no, we're a family and we make decisions together. But she noticed my refusal. I can tell by the way she's writing notes and the way she's not quite looking at Dad anymore. She says she needs to consult with the surgical team and leaves the room. For about 30 seconds, I feel powerful, like my words actually mattered, like someone finally heard me. Then Dad leans close and whispers that I'm embarrassing him and making this harder than it needs to be. His breath smells like coffee, and I can see the muscle in his jaw twitching. We wait in the consultation room for almost 20 minutes, and I can hear voices in the hallway. The clinic administrator comes in with a tablet and asks if she can speak to Dad privately. He refuses and says anything they need to discuss can happen in front of me since it's about my care. She looks uncomfortable but explains that given my stated refusal, they need to consult their legal department about proceeding. Dad's voice stays calm but gets louder as he insists that parental consent is legally sufficient for minors, and I'm just nervous about the procedure. Dr. Copeland shows up a few minutes later and immediately starts talking over everyone about how common it is for teenagers to have anxiety about elective procedures. He says my assent can be managed with proper counseling and that we shouldn't let normal pre-surgery jitters derail months of planning. I try to interrupt and say it's not jitters, I genuinely don't want this, but he just nods like I'm proving his point about anxiety. The administrator keeps looking at her tablet and saying she needs legal clearance before they can proceed. Dr. Copeland gets frustrated and starts talking about how they've already allocated surgical time and resources, how my father has paid in full, how they have a professional obligation to proceed. I feel sick watching these adults discuss ways to ignore what I just said. The system I thought would protect me is just figuring out how to work around my refusal. The administrator finally says she'll expedite the legal review, and they should have an answer by end of day. Dad thanks her and Dr. Copeland, and I sit there feeling my hope drain away as they treat my explicit no like a paperwork problem to solve. What I don't know is that Missy McNeil is sitting in a family court office at that exact moment, filling out emergency petition forms. She's typing fast, attaching all the evidence I gave her and the recordings and the photos. The judge's clerk tells her emergency orders usually take 3 to 5 business days, but she explains this is time-sensitive, that surgery is scheduled within 48 hours. She gets shuffled to a different office where a judge reviews the petition during her lunch break. By early afternoon, the court issues a temporary emergency order, halting all elective medical procedures on me while the investigation continues. The clerk faxes it to the clinic's main office and to Dr. Copeland's practice. I'm sitting in that waiting room with Dad, watching him fill out more consent forms, completely unaware that somewhere across town, paperwork is moving through the system that might actually save me. The hope exists in file folders and fax machines while I'm trapped in a surgical center trying not to panic. The clinic never calls back that day with legal clearance, and Dad gets angry on the drive home. The next morning, he tells me I'm staying home from the school because I need to rest before surgery, and he doesn't want school stress affecting my recovery. I ask when the surgery is, and he says they're finalizing the date. I'm stuck in the house with no phone, no computer, no way to contact anyone. Dad works from home that day, setting up his laptop at the kitchen table where he can see the stairs. Every time I move, he looks up. I try to act normal, eating breakfast and pretending to read a book, but inside I'm screaming. The walls feel closer every hour, and I keep thinking about the camera in my room watching my empty bed. I go upstairs around noon and lie down just so Dad can see me on the monitor being compliant. I stare at the ceiling and count the minutes until I can think of some excuse to leave the house. Around 3, I hear Dad on a phone call talking about surgical scheduling, and my stomach drops. I force myself to breathe slowly and think, I need to get out of this house and in front of people who are required to help me. That evening, I start my plan. I double over in the living room, clutching my stomach, and tell Dad something's wrong. He asks what hurts, and I say my stomach, that I feel like I'm going to throw up. He watches me for a minute, trying to figure out if I'm faking. I run to the bathroom and make retching noises, then come out looking pale and shaky. I tell him it's getting worse and I can't stop feeling like I need to puke. He's stuck because if I'm actually sick and he ignores it, I might have complications that delay surgery. But if I'm faking and he takes me to urgent care, I might tell someone something I shouldn't. I see him calculating the risk, and I clutch my stomach harder and mention that I haven't eaten anything weird. He finally grabs his keys and tells me to get in the car. His hand grips my arm too tight as we walk to the garage, and I know he suspects this is an act, but he can't risk me actually being sick. On the drive, I keep my hand on my stomach and lean against the window. He doesn't say anything, but his knuckles are white on the steering wheel. The urgent care waiting room is half full with people coughing and kids crying. Dad checks me in, and I tell the receptionist my stomach really hurts. We sit in plastic chairs and wait for 20 minutes before a nurse calls my name. When we get to the exam room, she asks Dad to wait outside while she gets my vitals. He starts to argue, but she says it's policy for initial assessment. As soon as the door closes, I tell her I'm not actually sick, that my dad is trying to force me into surgery I don't want. The words tumble out fast and quiet. She keeps taking my blood pressure while I talk, her face professional and calm. I pull up my email on the computer they have in the room and show her the photos of my face with Sharpie marks that I sent to myself. She looks at them for a long time and then asks me specific questions about the surgery and whether I've told anyone else. I mention Missy McNeil and the school counselor, and she nods while writing everything down. She tells me she's filing a report and that she needs to document everything I've told her. I feel ashamed for faking sick and wasting medical resources, but also determined because this is another piece of evidence, another adult who knows what's happening. She asks if I feel safe going home, and I tell her the truth, that I don't know, but I don't have anywhere else to go. She steps out to talk to someone, and I sit there on the exam table with paper crinkling under me, wondering if this will help or just make Dad angrier. The doctor comes in and examines me quickly, asks about my symptoms. I tell him my stomach feels better now, and he looks at me like he knows exactly what's happening. He says he's going to recommend observation for a few hours just to be safe. When the nurse comes back, she mentions to Dad in the hallway that they filed a mandatory report based on concerns raised during the exam. Dad's voice gets loud immediately, echoing down the hallway about how this is family business and medical decisions are parental rights. I hear other people in the waiting room go quiet. The nurse stays calm and explains that they're required by law to report certain situations. Dad keeps getting louder, saying this is harassment and he's going to file complaints and talk to lawyers. Someone's phone comes out and I see a patient filming through the exam room door. Hospital security shows up, 2 guys in uniforms who tell Dad he needs to lower his voice or leave. He switches tactics immediately, getting calm and apologetic, explaining that he's just worried about his son and the stress of medical issues. But his performance is cracking and I can see people staring at him. The security guard who's closer to me catches my eye, and I must look terrified because his expression shifts. He asks if I'm okay and I nod but don't say anything. Dad finally sits back down in the waiting area, but he's radiating anger. I stay in the exam room feeling scared, but also weirdly validated because other people just saw him lose control, saw the real him instead of the charming act. We leave urgent care 2 hours later after the doctor clears me, and Dad is silent the whole drive home. The next morning his phone rings early, and I hear him answer in that fake friendly voice he uses for important calls. I creep to the top of the stairs and listen. Dr. Copeland is suggesting they move the procedure to a smaller outpatient center he knows, somewhere with less administrative oversight. Dad asks about timing, and Copeland says they can get me in within a few days, that this facility is more flexible about consent procedures. My stomach drops as I realize they're routing around the system, finding a place that won't ask as many questions. Dad agrees, and they start discussing logistics. I back away from the stairs, feeling despair crash over me. Every time I think I've created an obstacle, they just find a way around it. People with money and determination can always find doctors who'll do what they want. The rules that are supposed to protect kids like me just become inconveniences for people like Dad to work around. I go back to my room and sit on my bed staring at nothing, trying to think of what to do next. Mom spends that whole morning in the attic, and I hear her moving boxes around up there. Around lunch, she comes down with Grandpa's old photo albums, the real ones that Dad never shows anyone. She sets up her phone and starts taking pictures of the pages, focusing on Dad's actual teenage photos. Crooked nose, weak chin, eyes that sit close together, nothing like the imaginary perfect face he's been describing. She emails the photos to Miss McNeil with a message I watch her type over her shoulder. It just says that Dad's memories don't match reality, and these are the real photos. I feel cautious gratitude watching her do this because it's concrete help, actual evidence that might matter. But I also feel doubt because she's done small things before that never added up to real protection. This could be another half measure that makes her feel better, but doesn't actually stop Dad. She closes her laptop and looks at me, and I don't know what to say, so I just nod. She nods back, and we sit there in this weird moment of maybe alliance that feels too fragile to trust. That evening, Dad comes home and I hear him in his office checking emails on his computer. The house goes silent for a long minute, and then his chair scrapes back hard. He walks into the kitchen where Mom is washing dishes, and I watch from the hallway. He holds up his phone, showing her email to Miss McNeil with the scanned photos attached. Mom's hands freeze in the soapy water. Dad doesn't yell, which is worse. He opens his wallet and takes out every credit card, stacking them on the counter. Then he holds out his hand for her purse, and she gives it to him with shaking fingers. He removes her debit card, her emergency cash, her car keys. Mom starts crying but stays quiet, tears running down her face while she keeps her hands in the dishwater. Dad sets everything in a neat pile and says, "Traders don't get to spend his money or use his car." He explains it calmly like he's teaching a lesson about consequences. I stand in the hallway watching the system lock down around both of us and feel hopeless because leaving requires money and transportation, and Mom just lost both. Dad walks past me to his office and locks all the cards and keys in his desk drawer. Mom stays at the sink crying softly, and I want to help but don't know how when we're both trapped by the same lack of resources. 2 days later, my phone rings during lunch at the school, and it's Ms. McNeil. I step into the empty hallway and answer. She tells me the family court denied the emergency order. The judge said the evidence shows family problems, but not enough immediate danger to stop Dad from making medical choices for me. Her voice sounds tired and sorry, but the words hit me like getting punched in the stomach. I lean against the lockers trying to breathe right. Mrs. McNeil keeps talking about next steps and building a stronger case, but I barely hear her because my brain is stuck on the fact that the system just chose Dad's rights over my body. The court looked at everything, all the recordings and photos and reports, and decided it wasn't bad enough yet. I thank her and hang up and slide down the wall to sit on the floor. A teacher walks by and asks if I'm okay, and I nod and say I just need a minute. The system I trusted just told me that my father wanting to break my face and rebuild it matters less than his legal right to make choices for me because I'm only 16. That afternoon, I go home and pull my old backpack out of my closet. I start packing it with stuff I might need if I have to run. 3 changes of clothes folded tight. My birth certificate and social security card that I copied at the school. The cash I saved from birthday money over the years, about $200 in small bills. I grab my phone charger and a water bottle, some granola bars from the kitchen when Dad isn't looking. I stuff it all in the bottom and pile old stuffed animals and board games on top so it looks normal if anyone opens my closet. I write the child abuse hotline number on my arm in pen and then copy it into my phone under a fake name. I look out my window at Mrs. Miller's house next door. She's home most days, and I've known her since I was little. If I need to run, I could probably get to her door before Dad catches me. The planning steadies me a little, turns the panic into steps I can take. I can't stop what's coming, but I can be ready to move if I get a chance. Dad comes home early and tells us to pack bags because we're staying at a hotel tonight. He says the surgical center is across town, and we need to be close for the early morning check-in time. Mom asks why we can't just leave early tomorrow, and he says he's not risking traffic or any other delays. I pack my school backpack with normal stuff so he doesn't see the go bag hidden in my closet. We drive across town in silence, and Dad checks us into a hotel near the medical plaza. The room has 2 beds and 1 bathroom, and Dad takes the bed closest to the door. I realize he's blocking the only exit and feel trapped immediately. Mom goes into the bathroom and I hear her crying through the door, but she doesn't come out for a long time. I sit on the far bed looking at the window, but we're on the 4th floor, so that's not an option. The room smells like cleaning chemicals, and the walls are thin enough that I hear the TV from next door. Everything familiar is miles away, and nobody here knows us, or would think twice about a dad and his family staying near a medical center. I'm cut off from the school, from Mrs. Gutierrez, from any place where people might notice something wrong. At 2 a.m., I wait until Dad's breathing goes deep and even. I slip out of bed and walk into the hallway in my socks. My heart pounds so hard I can feel it in my throat. I find the fire alarm on the wall near the elevator and pull it down. The sound is so loud it hurts my ears and lights start flashing. Doors open up and down the hallway and people stumble out looking confused and scared. I try to move toward the stairs away from our room, but Dad appears in the doorway in seconds like he was waiting for this. He grabs my arm hard and pulls me back toward him. People are filing toward the stairwell, and I try to tell someone that I need help, but Dad holds me against his side. When the firefighters arrive and start checking floors, Dad flags one down in the hallway. He explains that his son is having a mental health crisis from pre-surgery stress tomorrow and must have pulled the alarm in a panic. His voice is concerned and apologetic, and he keeps his hand on my shoulder like a worried parent. The firefighter looks at me with pity and asks if I'm okay. I try to say I'm not, but Dad squeezes my shoulder and talks over me about anxiety and teenage emotions. They clear the building and let everyone back in after 20 minutes. Dad walks me back to the room, and Mom is standing by the window looking scared. The firefighters saw me as a sick kid instead of someone trying to escape, and now I look crazy on top of everything else. After the chaos dies down and Dad falls back asleep, I lie awake until I'm sure he won't wake up. Around 4 a.m., I slip out again and take the elevator down to the lobby. The hotel has a small business center with 2 computers in a corner behind the front desk. The night clerk is reading something on his phone and doesn't look up. I log into my email and plug in a USB drive I brought from the school. I upload every photo, every recording, every document I've collected. The files take forever to transfer, and I keep watching the lobby to make sure Dad doesn't appear. When it finishes, I email everything to Miss Gutierrez with a message explaining where we are and that the surgery is scheduled for this morning. I add the surgical center address and Dr. Copeland's name. Then I clear the browser history and delete the sent message from the hotel computer. I pull out the USB drive and slip it in my sock. The digital trail feels like breadcrumbs I'm leaving behind, hoping someone follows them in time. I take the elevator back up and slide into bed before Dad wakes up. Before dawn, I sit at the hotel desk and write on the stationery with the hotel logo. I write that I do not consent to any surgery. I write that I'm being forced and that I've said no multiple times. I write that I want my face to stay the way it is. My handwriting stays steady even though my hands want to shake. I fold the paper and tape it to my chest under my shirt. The paper sits against my skin like proof that can't be erased. I feel calm in a weird, disconnected way, clear about what I want, even though I'm scared about being ignored. Dad wakes up and tells us to get ready. We check out and drive to the surgical center as the sun comes up. The building is small and plain, not like the big hospital where we went before. This place looks like it doesn't ask too many questions. At the intake desk, a nurse asks me to confirm my name and date of birth. I give her the information and then say clearly that I don't consent to the procedure. She looks up from her computer and glances at Dad. I say it again, that I don't want the surgery and I'm refusing treatment. Dad jumps in and says I'm just nervous and we've been planning this for months. The nurse looks between us with an uncertain expression. Another staff member comes over and asks what's wrong. I repeat that I'm refusing the surgery and I don't consent. They exchange looks and one of them goes to get someone else. Dr. Copeland shows up in scrubs and Dad shakes his hand. The doctor says guardian consent is enough and we're all set to proceed. I keep saying I don't consent, repeating it like if I say it enough times someone will finally listen. The staff members look uncomfortable, but nobody stops the process. I'm scared, but I don't back down, stating my refusal over and over like a prayer that someone might actually hear. I stand up and walk toward the front door. Dad moves fast and grabs my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. I try to pull away and he yanks me back toward the prep area. I raise my voice and say I don't consent, that I'm being forced, that someone needs to help me. Dad tries to cover my mouth with his other hand and I twist away. We're struggling in the hallway now and I'm yelling that I refuse treatment. Security guards come running and pull us apart. One holds Dad back and the other keeps me separated on the other side of the hallway. I'm shaking and my arm throbs where Dad grabbed it. The terror and adrenaline make everything feel sharp and too bright. This is my last chance before they sedate me and take away my ability to fight back. I keep yelling that I don't consent until my voice goes hoarse. Police arrive within 5 minutes. 2 officers in uniform who look tired and annoyed. They separate us into different rooms and I end up in an exam room with one officer. He asks what's going on, and I explain about the surgery I don't want and how Dad is forcing me. I show him the refusal statement taped to my chest and the marks on my arm from where Dad grabbed me. The officer takes notes and nods, but his expression stays neutral. He says medical decisions between parents and kids are complicated and that Dad has legal rights to make choices for me. He talks about family court and proper channels, and I watch my emergency get turned into a disagreement about parenting. The other officer talks to Dad and Dr. Copeland in the hallway, and I hear words like parental authority and family matter. When they bring us back together, the officers say this is a civil issue, not a criminal one. They suggest we go home and work it out or take it to family court. I feel deflated and exposed, my desperate fight to protect myself reframed as teenage drama instead of someone trying to stop an assault. The police leave and the surgical center staff tell us they're not comfortable proceeding today, given the disruption, and they'll reschedule. Dad's already got his hand on my shoulder, steering me toward the exit, when the automatic doors slide open and Mizzy McNeil walks in carrying a thick manila folder. She spots us and her expression shifts into professional determination as she heads straight for the front desk. I watch her show her CPS badge to the receptionist and ask for Doctor Copeland, and Dad's grip on my shoulder tightens until it hurts. The receptionist makes a phone call, and Dr. Copeland appears from the back hallway looking annoyed until he sees Ms. McNeil's badge. She opens the folder and spreads documents across the counter, pointing at specific sections while talking in a low voice I can't quite hear. Dr. Copeland's face goes from annoyed to concerned as he reads whatever she's showing him. Miss McNeil pulls out more papers, and I catch glimpses of official letterhead and what looks like photos. She's talking about the urgent care visit and pointing at something that makes Dr. Copeland shake his head. Dad tries to walk over, but Miss McNeil holds up one hand in a stop gesture without even looking at him. She keeps talking to Dr. Copeland and pulls out what looks like a statement with a signature at the bottom. I hear her say Mrs. Miller's name and something about documented concerns from multiple sources. Dr. Copeland picks up the papers and reads them more carefully, his jaw working like he's chewing the inside of his cheek. Miss McNeil says something about medical board investigations, and the words make Dr. Copeland go pale. He excuses himself and walks quickly down the hallway with his phone already out. Dad follows him, and I hear raised voices but can't make out the words. Miss McNeil stays at the counter organizing her papers and glances over at me with an expression I can't read. Mom stands frozen near the waiting room chairs like she doesn't know whether to sit or run. I stay where I am because moving feels impossible, and my legs are shaking. Dr. Copeland comes back 15 minutes later, looking like someone punched him in the stomach. He walks to the counter and tells Missy McNeil that he just spoke with his malpractice insurance carrier, and they're advising a 72-hour pause on all elective procedures pending legal review. Missy McNeil nods and makes a note in her folder. Dr. Copeland turns to Dad and says the surgery is postponed for 3 days while they sort out the liability concerns. Dad's face goes red, and he starts arguing about contracts and deposits already paid. Dr. Copeland just shakes his head and says the insurance company won't cover him if he proceeds against their advice. I can breathe again for the first time in hours, even though my chest still feels tight. The relief is huge, but incomplete because 72 hours is just a delay, not a cancellation. Dad will find another way or another doctor or just wait out the pause. Ms. McNeil collects her papers and tells Dad she'll be following up within 48 hours. She looks at me and says to call her office if anything changes. Dad doesn't say anything, just grabs Mom's arm and pulls her toward the exit. I follow because I don't have another choice. Back at the hotel that afternoon, Dad slams the door so hard the mirror rattles. He rounds on me with his face twisted, and before I can move, his hand cracks across my cheek. The sting is sharp and hot, and my eyes water from the impact. I stumble back against the desk and touch my face where it's already starting to throb. Mom makes a small sound and steps between us with her hands up. Her voice shakes, but she says, "Stop, just stop." And it's the first time she's physically put herself between me and Dad. Dad shoves her aside, and she hits the bed frame hard enough to gasp. He's yelling about how I embarrassed him in front of medical professionals and ruined everything he planned. His voice is loud enough that I'm sure other guests can hear through the walls. I back toward the bathroom, but there's nowhere to go in this small room. The shock of his hand hitting my face is transforming into something else, something cold and clear. I understand now that nothing I do will ever be enough. I could let him break every bone in my face and rebuild me exactly like his teenage photos, and it still wouldn't satisfy whatever broken thing drives him. Mom is crying and holding her side where she hit the bed frame. Dad keeps raging about wasted money and lawyers and how I'm deliberately sabotaging his legacy. His words blur together into noise. My cheek throbs and I can feel it swelling. I stay quiet because talking will just make it worse. Eventually, Dad runs out of steam and throws himself into the chair by the window. He pulls out his phone and starts typing furiously. Mom helps me to the bathroom and we run cold water over a washcloth. She presses it against my face and whispers that she's sorry. The apology feels empty because sorry doesn't stop anything from happening. We stay in the bathroom until Dad leaves to get food, and then we sit on the bed not talking. 20 minutes later, someone knocks hard on the door. Mom opens it to find 2 police officers standing in the hallway with serious expressions. The officer on the left asks if everything is okay because the front desk received a complaint about a disturbance. Mom starts to say we're fine, but I step forward where they can see my red, swollen cheek. The officers look at each other and ask to come inside. They separate us into different areas of the room, and one officer talks to me while the other talks to Mom. I tell him what happened and show him where Dad hit me. The officer takes photos of my face with his phone and writes notes. He asks if this has happened before and I say no, but explain about the surgery and everything else. Mom is talking to the other officer in a low voice and I see her nodding. When Dad comes back with takeout bags, the officers stop him at the door. They explain that they received a domestic violence complaint and there's visible injury on a minor. Dad tries to explain it away as a misunderstanding, but the officers cut him off. They say based on the physical evidence and witness statements, they're issuing an emergency protective order. Dad has to leave the hotel immediately and stay at least 500 feet away from me and Mom for 48 hours. Dad's face goes through about 5 different expressions before settling on cold fury. He demands to see a supervisor and threatens to call his lawyer. The officers don't budge, and one of them escorts Dad to collect his things from the room. Dad grabs his bag and walks out without looking at either of us. The officer hands Mom paperwork about the protective order and explains that violating it is a criminal offense. They give us their card and tell us to call if Dad shows up or contacts us. After they leave, Mom locks the door and puts the chain on. We sit in silence for a long time. The shaky relief of his absence fills the room, but so does fear about what happens when 48 hours runs out. For now, though, I can sleep without watching the door. Mr. McNeil calls the next morning while Mom and I are eating continental breakfast in the hotel lobby. She asks how we're doing and I tell her about the protective order. There's a pause and then she says, that's actually helpful for what she needs to discuss. She explains she's filed for an expedited court hearing about temporary restrictions on medical decisions. The hearing is scheduled for 3 days from now. A real judge will listen to my testimony and review all the evidence we've gathered. Mr. McNeil says this is my chance to be heard by someone with actual authority to make binding decisions. The focused preparation that replaces some of my fear feels different from the panic I've been living in. This might actually work. She tells me to meet with Missy Gutierrez today to start preparing my testimony. I need to be ready to clearly explain what's been happening and what I want. Mom squeezes my hand under the table. Mrs. Gutierrez meets us at a coffee shop near the hotel that afternoon. She has a legal pad and starts asking me questions about specific incidents. When did the measuring start? What exactly did Dad say about the surgeries? How many times did I refuse? We go through everything chronologically and she writes down dates and details. Then she has me practice explaining it out loud like I'm talking to the judge. I stumble over words at first and get emotional, but she coaches me to stay calm and factual. We rehearse the key points over and over until I can say them without my voice shaking. She helps me organize the evidence, photos in one folder, audio recordings queued up on my phone, written statements in another folder. Mom practices too, explaining her perspective and what she witnessed. Mrs. Gutierrez tells us judges respond better to clear, specific examples than general statements. Show, don't tell. My nervous clarity sharpens as I realize I need to be composed and detailed, rather than emotional to be taken seriously. We practice for 3 hours until my answers sound natural instead of rehearsed. The family courtroom is smaller than I expected, with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that buzz. Dad sits at a table on the left with a lawyer in an expensive suit. The lawyer is already talking to the judge when we walk in, gesturing with his hands and smiling. I catch words like masculine guidance and father's investment in his son's confidence. The lawyer makes it sound like Dad is some kind of hero parent helping his insecure kid. I sit in the witness area with Mom and Ms. McNeil behind the barrier. My hands are sweating and I wipe them on my jeans. Dad looks at me once with an expression I can't read. The courtroom feels surreal, like my face and body are evidence in a case about who owns them. The judge is a woman maybe 50 with glasses and gray hair pulled back. She listens to Dad's lawyer without expression. The lawyer talks about parental rights and medical decision-making and how teenagers often resist things that are good for them. He shows photos of me with the uneven haircut and uses words like acting out and oppositional behavior. I feel anger controlled by focus as I watch Dad perform concern while his lawyer paints me as a difficult, rebellious kid. Missy McNeil stands when it's her turn and presents the evidence folder. She walks through the timeline methodically. The photos of my face marked with surgical plans, the audio recording, the urgent care reports, Mrs. Miller's statement, the protective order from 2 days ago. Each piece of evidence gets labeled and entered into the record. When the judge calls me to testify, I walk to the witness stand with my heart pounding. I swear to tell the truth and sit in the chair that's too big. The judge asks me to explain in my own words what's been happening. I start with the photos everywhere in the house and Dad's daily measurements. I describe the surgery folder and the 6 procedures he planned. I explain how I refused multiple times and he kept pushing forward anyway. My voice stays steady as I talk about the Sharpie marks on my face and the surgical center and trying to leave. Then Miss McNeil asks me to play the audio recording. I pull out my phone and the courtroom goes quiet. Dad's voice fills the room, reciting measurements and talking about breaking down my bone structure. His final words echo off the walls. You'll be perfect. You'll be me. The judge's expression shifts as she listens. I explain that I don't want to look like anyone except myself. My face is my face and I should get to keep it. The exposure feels raw but resolute. Dad's lawyer tries to cross-examine me and asks if I understand my father just wants me to be confident. I say I understand he wants me to look exactly like his teenage self, and that's not the same thing. The lawyer asks if I've been influenced by my mother or the social worker. I say no one had to convince me that I don't want someone to break my jaw. The judge tells the lawyer to move on. During lunch recess, Mrs. McNeil gets a phone call and steps into the hallway. When she comes back, she's trying not to smile. She tells me that Dr. Copeland just received formal notice that the medical board opened an inquiry into his practice. The complaint alleges he was attempting to perform non-therapeutic procedures on a protesting minor. Dr. Copeland sent an immediate response withdrawing from my case and terminating the doctor-patient relationship. Relief washes over me, but it's mixed with wariness. One doctor backing out doesn't mean Dad won't find another one willing to take his money. Mrs. McNeil says the medical board inquiry will make other surgeons think twice before taking the case. Dad's lawyer looks stressed when court resumes and asks for a continuance to consult with his client. The judge denies it and says we're finishing today. The judge takes 10 minutes to review her notes before announcing her decision. She grants a temporary order prohibiting any elective cosmetic procedures without explicit court approval. Dad is restricted to supervised visits only at an approved facility. She states clearly that my refusal is documented and credible, and my bodily autonomy deserves protection. The order is effective immediately and will remain in place pending a full hearing in 90 days. The grounded relief I feel is huge but incomplete. Temporary orders can be challenged, and I know Dad won't accept this quietly. Dad's face is stone as the judge explains the terms. His lawyer is already making notes about appeals. Mom cries quietly next to me. Mrs. McNeil squeezes my shoulder. We leave through the side exit to avoid Dad in the hallway. 2 days later, Mom's phone buzzes with a message from Dad's lawyer. The text contains what the lawyer calls clarifications, but read like threats. Dad wants me to understand this is just a temporary setback. He's not giving up on correcting this mistake or preserving his legacy. The lawyer's careful language can't hide the menace underneath. Mom shows me the message and then shows it to Ms. McNeil. That afternoon, Mom meets with a lawyer Ms. McNeil connected her with and files for legal separation. The lawyer explains emergency support options and temporary custody arrangements. Mom struggles with the financial reality of leaving because Dad controlled everything. The lawyer talks about court-ordered support and asset division. I feel mixed emotions sitting in that office. Safer but unstable. Protected by paper but uncertain how long it holds. Mom signs the separation papers with shaking hands. The lawyer files them electronically and says Dad will be served within 24 hours. We drive back to the hotel in silence. Mom parks and turns off the car but doesn't get out. She says she should have done this years ago. I don't disagree. 2 weeks crawl by in the hotel before I go back to the school, and walking through those halls feels like stepping into a different dimension where nobody knows what just happened. Mrs. Gutierrez catches me at my locker first period and walks me to the counseling office where she introduces me to the school therapist who handles family trauma cases. The therapist has a quiet office with plants and soft chairs, and she explains how we'll meet twice a week to work through everything. I sit there nodding while she talks about coping strategies and processing trauma, and the whole thing feels surreal because just 2 weeks ago, I was fighting not to get my face cut open. Classes are weird because homework and tests feel both normal and completely pointless after everything. Like I'm supposed to care about algebra when my dad tried to remake my bone structure. Mrs. McNeil schedules a meeting at the hotel 3 days after I'm back at the school, and she spreads out papers on the tiny desk explaining the whole CPS case plan. Home visits every 2 weeks where a caseworker checks on our living situation and talks to both me and Mom separately. Mandatory family counseling sessions, though Dad has to attend his separately since the protective order is still active. Any contact with Dad has to be supervised at an approved facility with a professional present, and she explains this structure will stay in place for at least 6 months while the court case works through the system. I feel cautious hope listening to her outline all these protections, knowing that systems can fail, and Dad's lawyer is probably already looking for ways around everything. But right now the structure feels solid, like walls built around me that might actually hold. Mrs. McNeil asks if I have questions, and I ask what happens if Dad violates the order, and she explains he could face contempt charges and lose visitation rights completely. The IT specialist at the school helps me block Dad's number and email during lunch period that same week, walking me through privacy settings on all my accounts and showing me how to filter messages. I change my passwords to things Dad would never guess and enable 2-factor authentication on everything. But late at night back at the hotel, I still pull out my phone and scroll through Dad's social media, reading his posts about parental rights being under attack and how the system punishes fathers for caring too much. He never mentions me by name, but I know every post is about our case, and I check obsessively to see if he's posted photos or details. The empowerment of blocking him crashes against this hypervigilance I can't shake, and my therapist says it's normal to slip back into old patterns, even while building new ones. Mom meets with her sister one afternoon while I'm at the school, and when I get back to the hotel, she shows me a new bank account statement with her name only. Her sister lent her $2,000 to start building independence, and Mom has a notebook where she's tracking every expense down to the dollar. She gets hired part-time at a grocery store stocking shelves and says the schedule works around my school hours. I watch her research studio apartments on Craigslist in our price range, actually calling landlords and asking about availability. These concrete steps feel more real than any of her previous vague promises about leaving, and I start to believe she might actually follow through this time. The medical board contacts Dr. Copeland about 3 other complaints from families claiming he pressured their kids into unnecessary cosmetic procedures, and Ms. McNeil tells me he's shutting down his cosmetic practice while keeping his reconstructive surgery work. It's justice, but it tastes bitter because he faces consequences, but still gets to practice medicine and help people who actually need reconstruction. I'm glad he can't do this to other kids, but frustrated he's not fully stopped, not facing criminal charges or losing his license completely. I wake up at 3 a.m. 4 weeks after the court hearing with my heart pounding and my sheets soaked in sweat. Another nightmare about being strapped to a surgical table while Dad draws lines on my face. Instead of lying there panicking like I used to, I grab my phone and call the crisis hotline number my therapist gave me. The voice on the other end is calm and walks me through breathing techniques, counting inhales and exhales until my heart rate slows. 20 minutes later, I can breathe normally again, and I fall back asleep. And the next morning, I feel fragile but proud that I managed the panic instead of letting it eat me alive. The resilience I'm building feels like wet paper, like it could tear any second. But it's real, and I'm learning to use these tools when the trauma tries to swallow me. The first supervised visit with Dad happened 6 weeks after the separation papers at a family services center with gray walls and uncomfortable chairs. A professional facilitator sits in the corner taking notes while Dad performs concern, asking how school is going and whether I'm eating enough. But he can't help himself and makes comments about my hair growing out wrong and how my posture is affecting my facial symmetry. The facilitator writes everything down, and I watch Dad's manipulation tactics with detached clarity, seeing through the performance now that I have distance. He tries to make eye contact and do that intense stare thing that used to make me feel guilty, but it doesn't land the same way when there's a witness and a door I can walk through whenever I want. I can see his tactics now without being controlled by them, and when the hour ends, I leave without looking back. The follow-up hearing happens 3 months after the initial protective order, and the judge extends everything for another 6 months after reviewing the facilitator's reports and CPS documentation. I start a part-time job at a bookstore near the hotel that same week, shelving books and working the register on weekends. The paychecks are small, but they're mine, and I open my own savings account separate from Mom's to start building toward my future. Mom finds a studio apartment across town that's barely affordable with her grocery store pay and her sister's help, and we move our stuff in over one weekend. The physical distance from Dad feels protective, even though the legal situation is still messy, with his lawyer filing motions and requesting modifications to the visitation schedule. I'm building cautious independence one small choice at a time, knowing the case will drag on, but feeling more solid in who I am. I look in the mirror one morning in our new apartment and see my own face staring back, uneven haircut growing out in weird directions, the narrow jaw Dad hated so much, the nose that's mine and nobody else's. The court case continues with more hearings scheduled every few months, and Dad's lawyer keeps filing motions trying to chip away at the protective order. But my face belongs to me right now in this moment, and I feel quiet ownership without triumphalism or celebration. I understand that safety is temporary, and I'll keep fighting to protect myself for as long as it takes, but today, I'm still me. And that's enough.